What does the inner critic says regularly? And how can you look differently at these things that the inner critic says? The first, the worst, the one that happens pretty much to everybody is you are not good enough. Let it sink a moment. You are not good enough. It can almost get unnoticed. You can almost let it slip in between the fingers, like, yeah, I know I'm good enough. But when you get emotionally involved and you feel that you are not good enough, the feeling is horrible and you believe it. So whatever you're looking at in your life, where you feel that the reason why you do not dare a certain thing is because you don't feel you have what it takes, you don't feel you will manage, it's all part of the you're not good enough. What to do about it? Well, there is the first thing that I'm going to suggest is really blunt. It's really, and it's not meant to be insensitive in the sense that I know it's really difficult when you are in the midst of it, that you feel, oh, I'm not good enough. It feels like you will never get good enough. It's like inherently you are not good enough. So this first one is challenging, but is also really powerful because there is a cognitive level. Our intelligence, our rational mind knows that that is simply not true. So the first thing that you could consider doing mentally is also saying, giving the inner critic what he seemed to want to hear and say, okay, I am not good enough. Can I go now? It's like stopping the interaction by giving the inner critic rights. That's a really powerful thing, actually. It's not easy, but consider it. It's just finishing that interaction. Because what happens is that you're not good enough. You feel bad because you're not good enough. And you feel even worse. But it's not my fault that you're not good enough. And you go down a spiral of pain. If you can just step out of this emotional, that is also a bit really young part of yourself, and just say, okay, I'm not good enough. I hear you. I can, I can see how, from your perspective, that can be your conclusion. Can I go now and continue with my life and do things even if I'm not good enough for doing them, even if I may not manage? Can I just go on with my life? That's a first approach. Second way to look differently at the I'm not good enough. So the starting point is that everybody has the inner critic, and inner critic says to everybody that you are not good enough. So if the inner critic is right, it means God is wrong, the universe is wrong, the creator did a bad job. So see if you can reconcile these two. Either the universe has its own perfection in all the imperfection also, everything has a place, everything has sense, or the inner critic is right. So see which one of the two you feel more leaning towards, and not just emotionally. So what we are doing here, we are using our rational mind to make sense of something that touches us emotionally. So we are trying to use the rational adult to take care of the emotional pain. Because it is true, everybody has an inner critic. Only few, really few people extremely disturbed do not have an inner critic. Even people that worked on their inner critic and feel much stronger have moments where they, have a close encounter with the inner critic. So everybody eventually, in certain situations, has the feeling of I'm not good enough, or doubting, am I good enough? That's also to make you feel not alone. You're absolutely not alone with your inner critic. It's all of us. Something else I want to bring your attention towards. If you believe the inner critic that you're not good enough, if you do not react to that, if you don't start to do something to heal that pain, to face the inner critic in a different way, what you give up, it's things like love, intimacy, abundance. Because the reality of the inner critic is that when we feel so not good enough, everything that we do is going to go wrong, we do not open up. We cannot really engage deeply in love connection. We cannot have emotional, intimate connection with other. And therefore, we cannot accept, let flow, abundance of every sort. So are you ready to give up love, intimacy, and abundance to give in to what the inner critic says? Because at the end, it's also a choice to believe that you are not good enough. I know emotionally is touching you. And in the moment that you feel that can be not the moment where you can react. But eventually you can get a grip of yourself and use this information to see how you can start to think differently, to take care of your inner child so that your information are kind of contrasting what the inner critic says. Because when you give in into these beliefs of the inner critic, you are kind of renouncing your talents, renouncing believing that you have talents to share, and somehow also your environment has to do without your talents, because people that are strongly believing they're not good enough, they don't feel really comfortable sharing their talents, but they do have talents. So there is a lot of, there is a big price to pay for believing the inner critic. And that's the first thing the inner critic really often says. You are not good enough. The second one is you should have been better. You should have done better there. And all the sentences around comparing you with others and seeing you as less than others. So this is what I call the comparison game, where nobody wins, because you can always find someone to compare yourself with that could have done better, especially if you put a fish and an elephant in the same competition. They are different, they have different skills, depending on who do you set next to them for the comparison. There's going to be, a not really representative ends of a race. And that does not mean that you have to compare yourself with the same sort. If you're a fish, compare yourself to fishes. And if you're an elephant, compare yourself with elephants. I would say just don't compare yourself. Eventually, you can look at yourself now, yourself a month ago, and, acknowledge a work well done, see your progress, or identify where you may want to put even more attention. But the comparison game with other people, it's a really, really nasty game that doesn't bring anything good. It's also, in terms of connection, in terms of the relationship, it also disengages you. It doesn't foster connection. It doesn't foster intimacy. It doesn't foster friendship or romantic relationship. When you get in the comparison game, you are alone and you are always losing. Something better. Something else. It's not about being better. It's about how you experience yourself in your journey. It's about enjoying your journey. And even on a business level where feedback is provided because you have a standard, you have to perform and stuff. So it's required that feedback is given, but it's not given anymore in terms of comparison. It's given in terms of, first of all, noticing what's good. And then looking at what could be improved. So there is not the comparison, the other one did it better than you. It's about you with your skill did this very well, and this we see possibility for you to grow, to improve even more. So there is, it is so recognized that the inner critic approach of comparing and judging, you're not good enough, the other one do better, it's not working, that even on a business level, it has been transformed and the feedback is now given in a much more constructive way. So also when you talk about what can be done better, what can be improved, there is always a really specific constructive feedback on how. So you could say the inner critic needs to take some leadership classes to develop modern leadership skills. The third really, really common sentence that the inner critic says is, you cannot ask for help. You have to do it on your own. I hear this all the time. And what happens is that there is an association. So who asks for help is identified as unable, stupid, weak, whatever. You can find out what your personal inner critic thinks is the characteristic of people that ask for help. Because asking for help means accepting defeat, showing everybody you are not capable of things. Again, find out what is the specific of your inner critic, maybe in a specific situation. What does it mean for you asking for help? And the more specific you are, the more you can really get a clear answer. And when you get an answer to this kind of thing, the chance is extremely high that you're going to get an answer that you suddenly say, but that's absurd. Of course, that's not the case. By not listening all the way, or by not asking the question to clarify why the inner critic says what it says, sometimes we lose the opportunity to debunk these beliefs of the inner critic straight away. Because if your inner critic says, now I have an example of someone that is doing end thesis for a study. He's not asking for help, because who ask for help is not able, it means it's not capable to do the job. It should not be graduating if he cannot do everything on his own. Because asking for help means accepting that he's not capable, that he misses the skills, that is, whatever. But if you look at that, if this person would say out loud that that's the reason why he does not ask help, and that's the meaning assigned to asking help, he could not really defend this position. So asking this question, reflecting, who asked for help is, according to my inner critic, if I am in this difficult situation, my car broke down on the street, I should be able to change the tire that it needs changing. I don't want to ask for help, because who asks for help admits, maybe my inner critic thinks, if as a woman I have to ask for help for changing a tire, I'm giving in all the prejudice that the society has about women driving cars being absurd. There are also men that cannot change tires, or I may have other reasons. I may be able to, I may not want to. Asking for help can mean a lot of different things. I may want to give job to the people that change tires because I can. And why not? I know nice people that need to work and can change tires. The reality is that you can give a lot of interpretation. Asking help for help can also be an offering, can also be a sharing, a community, something that increases the community feeling. Going back to my example, a woman on the street with a problem with a car that needs to change a tire. What's my inner critic saying? Asking for help means being weak, being the archetypical weak woman that should not, go on the highway on a run in the car, whatever my inner critic may think about that. If I say it out loud, it's absurd. So these two things, looking at who asks for help is, and ends these words with the words, end this sentence with the word of the inner critic to find out what your inner critic believes. Who asks for help is. And asking for help means let the inner critic finish this sentence to find out what does for your inner critic asking for help means in that specific situation. Biggest risk in asking for help. We talked about it in the previous point. When you ask for help, you're making new friends. Because either you ask someone to help you with the thesis, either you ask someone to help you with the changing of the tire. Could be someone new, could be a new encounter, and could be that by making yourself a little bit vulnerable by asking help, you're actually making a new friend, someone that may like you, appreciate you, encourages you. And that's really scary for the inner critic because it becomes competition. Then it's the word of the inner critic versus the word of your new friends that really likes and appreciates you. So the inner critic doesn't really like you getting intimate friendship, connection, rather not. Second risk is your current relationship may get deeper, more intimate, more connected. Imagine if you have a good friend, but you never ask for help, so your friendship always stayed in a bit of a, friendly, slightly coolish level, and then suddenly you open up and you ask for help. That's intimacy. That's getting serious friendship, and that's, God forbid you become intimate with the people around you. Intimate relationships are the kryptonite for the inner critic. So asking for help, I believe that the real reason why the inner critic doesn't want us to do that is because it would make us connect with other people. The last thing I want to share about, really typical thing that the inner critic says, especially to women, you are too sensitive. It is a weakness. Now, there are different levels. It is true on one side that the more sensitive you are, the more you may need in life to learn how to handle your sensitivity, your perceptiveness, so that this becomes a skill you can use, a talent you can work with without becoming someone that gets triggered too easily. That's okay. That's every person that is sensitive or that has children that are sensitive knows that sensitivity comes with a bit of instruction manual. But that's good. There are many also people that are a bit too arrogant need a bit of instruction manual. When you have some characteristic that is a bit on the extreme side, when you have a lot of it, you may need to learn to choose freely. Do I use it all? Do I use a little bit? But that's called personal development. That's to create freedom. That's true of every characteristic. Only the inner critic tends to identify with a more matriarchal model where the more male archetypical characteristic are more valued than the more feminine characteristic, and sensitiveness belongs surely to the more feminine characteristic. This said, the reason why the inner critic struggle with us being sensitive is because the inner critic lacks sensitivity. So it doesn't know how to handle it. It perceives it as being wrong, being weak, something that you need to get rid of, something that you have to change, to hide. Forgetting that sensitive people don't really have those kind of choices. They can really learn to handle it, but they cannot really, they can try to hide it. But normally, if you do not know how to handle it, normally the hiding doesn't really work really well. There are more and more people born with quite a sensitivity. I'm really grateful for that. And the inner critic is getting a bit restless around that, even though nothing really happens. I mean, the fact that so many more sensitive people are born and walk around is not really dangerous for them. They are doing well. So the lack of sensitivity of the inner critic is what makes the inner critic a bit touchy around us being too sensitive and therefore to attack us for that. It's just discomfort. We are also human. So even if we, take away this conversation, this personal opinion about the fact that there are more and more people with a quite heightened sensitivity, even the one born before, we are just human. We have emotion. We get touched. We get emotional at times. And that also is perceived as being sensitive. We cannot not do that. It's actually much more healthy to learn to handle, to manage your emotion, your sensitiveness, to learn to feel yourself, to know yourself, and to know what to do in case, something happens that brings you out of balance. So these are the 4 things that the inner critic says a lot. You're not enough, but you are. You should have been better, but it doesn't matter because we're all different. You cannot ask for help, but actually if you do, you can get really connected to other people, and you are too sensitive, but we all are. So it's not really the point. I hope this helps to take a bit of a distance from the inner critic, because that's the most important. The first thing you need to do, if you start to work with the inner critic, if you realize there is an inner critic, the very first thing is separating yourself from the inner critic. So it's not that I'm not good enough. The inner critic says I'm not good enough. Seems a little different, but it makes all the difference. So it's not about I'm too sensitive. It's about the inner critic says I am too sensitive. It's not I should have done better. Reframe it. My inner critic believes I should have done better. You don't need to say what you think instead. Just separate. Just everything that you think that is a critic to yourself. Reformulate the sentence internally or in written and make it the inner critic says, the inner critic believes, the inner critic is telling me. That's the very first important step, because then you can experience yourself and the inner critic as 2 entities. And the inner critic is something you have. You are, and the inner critic is something you have. So I hope this little conversation helps. If you have any question or comment, let me know, and I'll see you in the next video.